That night was supposed to be a celebration. Another successful year for Nexora Systems, the tech company I had built from nothing but ambitious code and sleepless nights. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the bow tie of my custom Tom Ford tuxedo while contemplating how strange life can be. 7 years of marriage to Elise Monroe, and somehow we'd become strangers sharing a penthouse. Jonathan, are you almost ready? Elise's voice carried from the master bathroom, that practiced tone of controlled impatience I'd grown accustomed to. The car will be here in 10 minutes. Almost, I replied, running my hand through my dark hair that was just beginning to show flecks of gray at the temples. At 38, I still maintained the lean build of my younger days, though the constant strain of the past few years had etched subtle lines around my eyes. I watched Elise emerge from the bathroom in a crimson gown that hugged her figure perfectly. She'd always been stunning, tall with honey blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that could charm investors out of millions. Those same eyes had charmed me once, back when we were grad students with nothing but ambition and student loans. You look beautiful, I said automatically. She glanced at me, her expression softening momentarily. Thanks. You clean up nice yourself. An awkward silence hung between us, filled with all the things we no longer said to each other. There was a time when we couldn't stop talking, plotting our future together late into the night. Now our conversations revolved around schedules, business meetings, and which charity galas required our joint appearance. Are you sure you're up for this? She asked, applying a final touch of lipstick. You've been avoiding company events for months. I pocketed my phone, which contained access to every digital asset of Nexora Systems. You specifically asked me to be there, said it was important for morale. It is, she replied, not meeting my eyes. The team needs to see that leadership is unified, especially with the Series D funding coming up. I almost laughed. Unified? What a perfect corporate word for our perfectly corporate marriage. Well, can't disappoint the team, can we? Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, quickly swiped it away, and slipped the device into her clutch. A slight flush crept up her neck as she turned away, pretending to look for her wrap. Another red flag I chose to ignore. Car's here. Shall we? The ride to the Grand Palmer Hotel was quiet. Chicago's skyline glittered against the night sky as our driver navigated through downtown traffic. I watched Elise check her reflection repeatedly, nervously adjusting her hair, fidgeting with her earrings. In the 7 years I'd known her, I'd never seen her nervous before a business event. She was always the picture of confidence, the perfect CEO face for Nexora. Everything okay? I asked. Of course, she replied too quickly. Just want everything to be perfect. We spent a fortune on this party. I nodded silently. I spent a fortune on this party. The distinction mattered, though I'd long stopped pointing it out. On paper, Elise was the CEO of Nexora Systems, the brilliant visionary who'd taken the company from promising startup to industry disruptor. The reality was more complicated. I'd created the core technology, secured the initial funding, and still owned 72% of the company. But we'd agreed early on that Elise, with her Harvard MBA and camera-ready charm, would be the face of the company. I was content to remain in the background, building the technology that made us rich. The Grand Palmer Hotel was illuminated like a beacon, its classic architecture highlighted by strategic lighting that made the stone facade glow warmly against the cold December night. A red carpet extended from the curb to the entrance, lined with heat lamps to ward off the Chicago winter. As our car pulled up, I could see groups of employees already arriving, dressed in their finest attire, excited for the most lavish company event of the year. Remember to smile, Elise whispered as we exited the car. Her hand slipped into mine, a practiced gesture that looked natural to anyone watching, but felt mechanical to me. These people idolize you. They barely know me, I replied under my breath, forcing a smile as we approached the entrance. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with ice sculptures and white floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The room hummed with conversation and laughter, but something felt off. As we entered, the ambient noise dipped momentarily, Heads turned, eyes lingered, then quickly averted when I caught them looking. Whispers followed in our wake as we made our way through the crowd. I caught fragments of hushed conversations that stopped abruptly as we passed. Can't believe she would... Right in front of him. Does he know yet? My stomach tightened with a familiar dread, the same feeling I'd experienced over the past few months whenever I'd catch Elise ending phone calls abruptly when I entered a room or closing laptop screens when I approached. Mr. Hayes, so glad you could make it. It was Melissa Rogers, Elise's executive assistant, a petite brunette in her mid-20s with an ever-present iPad. Everyone's been asking if you'd show up. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. Looks like you've outdone yourself with the planning, Melissa. She beamed. All Mrs. Monroe's vision. I just executed the details. Her eyes darted between Elise and me, an uncomfortable tension in her expression. The board members are gathered near the stage. They've been asking for both of you. Elise's hand tightened around mine. We'll head over shortly. I need to greet some people first. As Melissa retreated, I leaned closer to Elise. What's going on? Everyone's acting strange. Don't be paranoid, she replied, smiling broadly and waving at someone across the room. It's just been a while since you've been social. People aren't used to seeing the mysterious Jonathan Hayes in person. Before I could respond, we were intercepted by the head of marketing and his wife, then by our chief legal counsel, then by a series of investors and partners. Each conversation felt stilted, with meaningful glances exchanged and sentences that trailed off abruptly. I noticed Richard Collins, the chairman of our board, watching us from across the room, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand and an inscrutable expression on his face. Richard and I had never gotten along. He'd been brought in during our Series B round, a condition from one of the major investors. He was old school business, all golf memberships and cigar lounges, while I represented the new tech generation. He thought I lacked the killer instinct necessary for big business. I thought he lacked the vision for where technology was heading. But he and Elise had always worked well together, presenting a united front during board meetings while I focused on product development. I watched as Richard excused himself from his conversation and made his way toward us, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving Elise. She straightened almost imperceptibly beside me, her breathing quickening. Jonathan, Richard greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good to see you out of your coding cave. And Elise, stunning as always. He kissed her cheek, lingering a moment too long. Richard, I nodded. Quite the party. Seems like everyone's in on some secret. He laughed, a practiced sound that echoed his boardroom chuckles when he was about to dismiss one of my technical concerns. You technologists, always seeing patterns where there are none. Just holiday high spirits, I assure you. His hand found the small of Elise's back, a casual touch that spoke of familiarity beyond professional boundaries. I said nothing, but made a mental note. Another piece in a puzzle I'd been unconsciously assembling. If you'll excuse me, I said, stepping back, I see David by the bar. Technical matter to discuss. I felt Elise's eyes on my back as I walked away, but she didn't try to stop me. Perhaps she was relieved. After an hour of small talk and forced laughter, I found myself next to David Wilson, our head of engineering and one of the few people at Nexra I genuinely liked. Having fun yet? David asked, nursing what looked like scotch on the rocks. About as much as a root canal, I replied, ordering a double whiskey. What's with everyone tonight? It's like they're all in on some joke I don't get. David shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. Look, John, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. There are rumors. The microphone feedback cut through the ambient noise, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. Richard Collins stood at the podium, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his tuxedo impeccably tailored. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and friends of Nexra Systems, he began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone used to commanding attention. What an incredible year it's been. I tuned out as he launched into the standard corporate platitudes, record growth, innovative breakthroughs, market disruption. My eyes found Elise near the front of the crowd, her posture tense, her smile fixed. Something was definitely off. But tonight isn't just about celebrating our company's success. Richard continued, pulling me back to his speech. Tonight is about celebrating the visionary leadership that has brought us to this moment. Elise Monroe has been the beating heart of Nexora Systems, guiding us through challenges with grace and determination. Applause erupted, and Elise made her way to the stage, accepting Richard's extended hand as she climbed the steps. Her smile looked genuine now, radiant even as she stood beside him. Elise isn't just a brilliant CEO, Richard said, his arm around her waist in a gesture that seemed inappropriately familiar. She's a true partner, someone who understands that business, like life, is about making bold choices and seizing opportunities. An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the crowd. Several people glanced in my direction, their expressions a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. Which is why, Richard continued, reaching into his pocket, I've decided to seize the greatest opportunity of my life. The room fell silent as Richard Collins, 52-year-old chairman of Nexor Systems, lowered himself to one knee in front of my wife. A collective gasp rose from the audience as he produced a small velvet box. Elise Monroe, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. You've transformed our company with your vision. Now I'm asking you to transform my life by becoming my wife. The diamond ring he held up caught the light from the chandeliers, scattering prisms across Elise's stunned face. Or at least she was attempting to look stunned. But I knew my wife. The slight upward curl of her lips, the lack of genuine surprise in her eyes. This was a performance, not a revelation. Time seemed to slow as I stood frozen by the bar, whiskey untouched in my hand. Somewhere in the crowd, a camera flashed, then another. All eyes alternated between the stage and me, waiting for the inevitable explosion, the jealous husband's tirade. Elise's eyes found mine across the room, a silent challenge in them as she turned back to Richard. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, I will marry you, Richard. Applause erupted, awkward at first, then gaining momentum as Richard slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. The string quartet began playing again, a celebratory tune that felt like a mockery of the vows Elise and I had exchanged 7 years earlier. I felt David's hand on my shoulder. Jesus, John, I had no idea it had gone this far. I heard rumors about them, but this, I'm so sorry, man. I set my untouched whiskey on the bar, straightened my jacket, and walked calmly toward the exit. No scene, no confrontation, no desperate pleas or angry accusations. Just the steady click of my shoes against the marble floor as conversation hushed in my wake. In the elevator, alone at last, I pulled out my phone. With a few taps, I accessed the Nexora financial system I'd personally designed. Another series of commands, and I revoked Elise's access to the company's primary accounts. One more tap, and the specialized investment fund that provided Nexora's operating capital was temporarily frozen pending security verification. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, I had effectively cut off the company's cash flow. Elise might be CEO on paper, but I had built the systems that kept Nexora running, and I had never been foolish enough to relinquish that control. Outside, the December air bit at my face as I declined the valet's offer to retrieve my car. Instead, I walked, letting the cold clear my head as I considered my next moves. 3 blocks away, I hailed a cab to take me not to our penthouse, but to my private office in the West Loop. The office was sparse, minimalist, a desk, an ergonomic chair, and 3 monitors connected to a custom-built computer. This was my sanctuary, the place where I'd written the original code that formed Nexora's foundation. On the wall hung the framed napkin where I'd sketched the initial architecture that would revolutionize how companies protected their data. I unlocked a cabinet and pulled out a folder containing the original company documentation. Articles of incorporation, patent applications, investor agreements. I spread them across the desk, confirming what I already knew. Nexora Systems was built on my intellectual property, my patents, my code. Elise had been instrumental in raising capital and building the brand, but the company's value lay in innovations that came from my mind. As I sat there planning my next steps, my phone began buzzing with messages. First Melissa, then David, then our CFO. All with variations of the same urgent question: what happened to the financial system? I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the company's organization chart and began making notes. Who was loyal to Elise? Who was loyal to the company itself? Who could be trusted during what would inevitably become a messy corporate divorce? By 3 a.m., I had drafted a series of documents. A formal separation agreement for Elise to step down as CEO, a restructuring plan for the company, and a personal letter to our major investors explaining the situation. I'd built enough redundancies into our corporate structure to weather this storm, but only if I moved quickly and decisively. I slept on the office couch, waking at 7 a.m. to the ping of an incoming email. It was from Richard Collins, tersely demanding an explanation for the financial system shutdown. I deleted it without responding and headed to the shower I'd had installed in the office for my late coding sessions. As I let the hot water wash over me, I thought about the signs I'd missed or ignored. The late nights Elise claimed were strategy sessions, the business trips that coincided with Richard's travel schedule, the growing emotional distance between us. By 9 a.m., dressed in fresh clothes I kept at the office, I was reviewing the company's financials in minute detail. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Over the past 8 months, Elise had approved unusually generous bonuses for herself and several board members, including Richard. The amounts weren't enough to trigger automatic alerts in our system, but together they represented millions in questionable compensation. I also found evidence of extravagant expenses, a weekend strategic retreat at a luxury resort in Aspen, first-class flights to conferences where Elise and Richard were the only Nexora representatives, a company credit card used to purchase jewelry from Tiffany's listed as client appreciation gifts, with no corresponding client names. At 10:30, my office door opened without a knock. Melissa Rogers stood there, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain, hair hastily pulled back, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Everyone's looking for you," she said, closing the door behind her. "The servers are down, payments aren't processing, and the board is having a meltdown." I leaned back in my chair. "Sit down, Melissa." She hesitated, then took the seat across from me. "Mrs. Monroe sent me to find you. She said it's urgent that you restore the systems immediately." "I imagine she does," I replied evenly. "But before that happens, I need you to deliver something to her." I picked up a sealed envelope containing the separation agreement. "Ensure she reads this privately before the emergency board meeting this afternoon." Melissa took the envelope, uncertainty written across her face. "Mr. Hayes, Jonathan, what exactly happened last night?" "A correction," I said simply. "A necessary market adjustment, you might say." She nodded slowly, a look of understanding dawning. "For what it's worth, not everyone was in on it. Some of us tried to warn you." "How long?" I asked, the question I'd been avoiding all night. Melissa looked down at her hands. "At least 6 months that I know of, maybe longer." I absorbed this information with a strange sense of detachment. 6 months, half a year of deception while I'd been buried in code, building the next generation of our security platform. "I appreciate your honesty," I said. "Now I need you to do one more thing for me. Tell me honestly, is Nexora worth saving?" She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. What we're building could change everything, but it needs the right leadership." I finished for her. That's what today is about. After Melissa left, I received the text I'd been expecting from Elise. "What the hell are you doing? Fix the systems now, or you'll destroy everything we've built." I didn't respond. Instead, I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, gathering evidence of financial improprieties and reviewing the company bylaws that gave me leverage despite Elise's public role. My phone rang. Elise again. I let it go to voicemail. Then Richard called. Then our lead investor. I ignored them all, focusing instead on securing digital evidence of every questionable transaction, every breach of fiduciary duty. At noon, my security pass still worked at our penthouse building. The doorman nodded respectfully as I entered, giving no indication he'd heard about last night's public humiliation. The private elevator opened directly into our living space, 6,000 square feet of designer furniture and curated art that had never felt like a home. I was packing a suitcase when I heard the elevator doors open. Elise's heels clicked against the marble floor, growing louder as she approached the bedroom. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded from the doorway, still wearing last night's gown, the diamond on her finger catching the light. You've locked down all the accounts, frozen the payroll system? Do you have any idea the damage you're causing? I continued folding a shirt. Interesting that your first concern is the money, not the public proposal from your lover. Don't be childish, she snapped. Richard got carried away. It was unexpected. Was it? I interrupted, finally looking at her. Because your acting skills have improved since our wedding day, but not that much. You knew exactly what was happening. She deflated slightly, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We were going to tell you privately, after the new year, when the funding round was complete. How considerate, I said, my voice flat. Did you read the agreement Melissa brought you? Your ridiculous demand that I step down? You can't force me out, Jonathan. The board won't allow it. I laughed then, a genuine sound that seemed to unnerve her. The board doesn't have a choice. Did you forget who actually owns this company? Who holds the patents? Who can, with a few keystrokes, make our entire platform unusable? You wouldn't, she whispered, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. You destroy your own creation out of spite? Not destroy, I corrected her. Reclaim. There's a difference. I zipped the suitcase closed. The emergency board meeting is at 3. You have until then to decide. Leave with dignity and a generous severance, or fight me and leave with nothing. Her composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes. We built this together, Jonathan. Everything we have. Stop, I cut her off. Just stop. For years, I let you take credit for my innovations because I didn't care about the spotlight. I let you play CEO while I did the real work. I even convinced myself it was a fair trade. Your social skills for my technical ones. But somewhere along the way, you started believing your own press. That's not fair, she protested. I worked just as hard. At spending, I interrupted again. The private jet, the office in Milan, the executive retreats to Bali, none of that built our technology. None of that kept our clients' data secure or our systems running. I set the suitcase on the floor. I've had our financial team analyze your contribution to actual revenue generation versus expenses. Would you like to see the results? Her silence was answer enough. I'm not doing this out of jealousy, Elise. I'm doing it because you and Richard have been systematically looting the company while contributing nothing of value. It ends today. I placed a second envelope on the bed. Divorce papers. My lawyer drew them up this morning. Given the circumstances and the prenup you insisted on, I think you'll find them more than fair. She stared at the envelope, then back at me, her expression hardening. You think you've won, don't you? That you can just erase me and move on? Richard has connections you can't imagine, investors who trust him implicitly. Then he should have no trouble starting a new company with you, I replied, picking up my suitcase. I wish you both every happiness. As I headed for the elevator, she called after me, her voice sharp with anger and fear. You need me, Jonathan. You always have. Who's going to be the face of Nexera without me? You? The socially awkward genius who can barely make eye contact during investor meetings? I paused, turning back to her with a calm I genuinely felt. I never needed you, Elise. I just convinced myself I did. That's a mistake I won't repeat. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m., but I arrived at the office at 2, slipping in through a private entrance to avoid the inevitable confrontations. I found David Wilson waiting for me in my rarely used executive office. You've caused quite the uproar, he said, closing the door behind me. The financial team is in panic mode, and marketing can't access any of the presentation materials for next week's client meetings. It's temporary, I assured him. Once the leadership transition is complete, everything will be restored. David raised an eyebrow. Leadership transition? You're really going through with this? You know what they've been doing, I said. Not a question, but a statement. He nodded slowly. The unnecessary expenses, the vanity projects, the personal use of company resources. Yeah, I've seen it. But taking on Richard is risky. He's got half the board in his pocket. Not anymore, I replied, sliding a folder across the desk. Take a look. David opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. Jesus, John, is this for real? They've been skimming profits through shell companies? Not just skimming, redirecting entire development budgets into consulting fees paid to companies owned by Richard's college roommate. I took the folder back. The board may like Richard's golf stories, but they like their investment returns more. Once they see this, they'll have no choice but to support me or face shareholder lawsuits themselves. What do you need from me? David asked. Your honesty. When they ask you about the technical implications of removing me from the company, tell them the truth, that without my ongoing input, the platform will become obsolete within months. He nodded. That's not even an exaggeration. Nobody understands the architecture like you do. The board meeting took place in the glass-walled conference room on the 30th floor of our downtown office. All 9 members were present, along with our chief legal counsel and CFO. Elise sat beside Richard, her eyes red-rimmed, but her posture defiant. She changed into a conservative black suit, her engagement ring conspicuously absent. I took my place at the head of the table, setting a leather portfolio in front of me. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I believe we have some urgent matters to discuss. Richard cleared his throat. Before we begin, I think we need to address the system failures that have paralyzed operations today. Our clients are panicking, and we're losing thousands by the minute. The systems aren't failing, I clarified. They're locked pending a security review, standard protocol when there's evidence of financial impropriety within the organization. A murmur ran through the room. Our CFO, Michael Daniels, looked particularly uncomfortable. What exactly are you implying, Jonathan? Richard demanded. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating clearly that unauthorized bonuses and expense allocations have been processed over the past 8 months. I slid copies of my financial analysis to each board member. You'll find the details here, along with corresponding bylaw violations. As they reviewed the documents, I continued. In light of these findings and considering recent events that call into question certain executives' commitment to the company's best interests, I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder to implement immediate leadership changes. Elise's face had gone pale. This is absurd. The board approved all executive compensation. The board approved the standard compensation package, I corrected, not the additional distributions labeled as strategic initiative funding that somehow ended up in personal accounts. Michael Daniels spoke up, his voice strained. I was told those allocations had your approval, Jonathan. They didn't, I replied simply, and the digital approvals that suggested otherwise have been proven to be forgeries. I handed another document to the legal counsel. The forensic evidence is quite clear. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is nothing but a vindictive response to a personal matter. Your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, I interrupted, and while the timing may seem connected to your public proposal, the financial investigation began 3 weeks ago when anomalies were first detected. I turned to address the entire board. Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, Elise Monroe is stepping down as CEO. I will assume the roles of both CEO and CTO, with a focus on returning to our core mission of providing the most secure data architecture in the industry. One of the venture capital representatives spoke up. And if we don't agree to this restructuring, I smiled thinly, then I'll be forced to exercise the nuclear option clause in our investor agreement. I turned to our legal counsel. Would you mind explaining the implications? The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. The nuclear option allows Mr. Hayes, as the patent holder of Nexora's core technology, to revoke the company's license to use said technology in the event of a hostile takeover or governance dispute. Essentially, without his patents, Nexora Systems would cease to exist as a viable business entity. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This isn't a negotiation, I continued calmly. It's a courtesy notification of decisions already made. The systems will be restored within the hour once the new leadership structure is confirmed and documented. Elise stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't do this. After everything I've given to this company. What exactly have you given, Elise? I asked, my voice level. The technology? That was me. The initial funding? My life savings and my parents' retirement fund? The industry connections? Those came through David and Michael, not you. I looked around the table. Elise is an excellent public speaker and a charming dinner companion. Those are valuable skills in business, certainly, but they don't entitle her to loot the company or betray its founder, either professionally or personally. Richard stood as well, his face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. The investors won't stand for it. Actually, said the venture capital representative, reviewing the financial documents with a grim expression, given the evidence presented and the legal realities, I believe Mr. Hayes is well within his rights. And frankly, the financial improprieties are deeply concerning from a governance perspective. You're taking his side? Richard demanded, incredulous. After all the deals we've closed together? This isn't about sides, Richard, the investor replied coolly. It's about fiduciary responsibility. These numbers suggest serious breaches of trust. One by one, the board members indicated their reluctant agreement. Elise watched in horror as her support evaporated, her carefully cultivated relationships proving insufficient against the hard reality of ownership rights and financial malfeasance. In the end, the vote was unanimous, with Richard and Elise abstaining. She would step down immediately with a moderate severance package contingent upon a non-disclosure agreement. Richard would remain on the board, but would be removed from all financial oversight committees. As the meeting concluded, I watched Elise sign the necessary documents, her hands shaking slightly, her signature a pale imitation of her usual confident scrawl. When she finished, she looked up at me, her expression a complex mix of anger, fear, and something that might have been respect. You've always been underestimated, she said quietly, even by me. That was the idea, I replied. It made things easier. She nodded slowly, removed the company key card from her purse, and placed it on the table. Without another word, she walked out, Richard following close behind. The news spread quickly through the tech industry. The story was too juicy to ignore. The publicity-shy genius reclaiming his company from his unfaithful wife and her boardroom lover. Market analysts predicted Nexora's imminent collapse without its charismatic CEO, but they fundamentally misunderstood what made the company valuable. In the weeks that followed, I implemented the changes I'd been contemplating for years. We scaled back the extravagant marketing events in international offices, refocusing on research and development. I promoted David Wilson to COO, giving him the authority to rebuild our engineering team without interference from marketing. The transition wasn't smooth. Several key executives who had been loyal to Elise resigned. Clients called with concerns about stability. Competitors spread rumors about our impending downfall. But through it all, I maintained a steady hand, conducting personal calls with our largest clients to reassure them, demonstrating new features that had been in my private development pipeline for months. 2 months after the board meeting, I stood before a packed auditorium at the annual Tech Security Conference, my first public appearance as Nexora's CEO. Public speaking had never been my strength. Elise had always handled these moments, but necessity had forced adaptation. For too long, I told the audience, the security industry has been dominated by flash over substance, slick marketing covering mediocre technology. I paused, making eye contact with various sections of the crowd. Today, Nexora is returning to first principles. Security isn't about buzzwords or celebrity CEOs. It's about mathematical certainty and technological innovation. I then unveiled the platform I'd been developing in secret, a quantum-resistant encryption method that made our competitors' offerings obsolete overnight. The crowd erupted in applause, and by the end of the day, our stock had risen 15%. 3 months after the board meeting, I received a text from Melissa Rogers. Richard dumped her. Apparently, the investors he promised would follow them never materialized. She's been calling the office asking about consulting opportunities. I didn't respond, but I wasn't surprised. Richard Collins had always been a fair-weather friend, someone who latched onto success rather than creating it himself. Without Elise's access to Nexora's resources and my technology, she had little to offer him beyond the temporary satisfaction of taking something that belonged to someone else. While the corporate battle had been swift and decisive, the divorce process proved to be a different kind of war. 2 weeks after the board meeting, I received notice that Elise had retained Patricia Lawson, one of Chicago's most aggressive divorce attorneys, known for securing substantial settlements regardless of prenuptial agreements. She's going for blood, my attorney, James Harrington, warned during our first meeting. Lawson's filing claims the prenup should be invalidated due to changed circumstances and undue influence. That's ridiculous, I said, reviewing the motion. Elise was the one who insisted on the prenup. She had her own lawyer drafted. James nodded, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Which is exactly why this is a desperate move. But Lawson's strategy isn't really about winning in court. It's about dragging this out until you're willing to settle just to end it. I won't be bullied, I stated firmly. Not in the boardroom and not in divorce court. The next 3 months became a battlefield of legal maneuvers. Elise's team demanded financial records going back to before we were married, questioned the valuation of my patent holdings, and even tried to claim she was the true creative force behind Nexora's success. During our first court appearance, I was struck by how different Elise looked. Gone was the polished CEO, replaced by a woman dressed conservatively in navy blue, projecting vulnerability. Her attorney painted a picture of a devoted wife whose husband had cruelly cut her off from the company she had helped build. Mrs. Hayes Monroe sacrificed her own career opportunities to support her husband's vision, Lawson argued before the judge, only to be discarded when he no longer needed her public relations skills. My attorney calmly dismantled this narrative, presenting evidence of Elise's affair, the financial improprieties, and most damaging emails between Elise and Richard, discussing how to gradually sideline me from the company I had founded. Your Honor, James said, the prenuptial agreement was Ms. Monroe's idea specifically because she believed her business acumen would far outstrip my client's technical skills. That this calculation proved incorrect does not invalidate a contract she herself insisted upon. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, seemed unimpressed by the theatrical aspects of Elise's case. Miss Lawson, I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement, and it appears properly executed with independent counsel on both sides. Do you have any evidence of fraud or coercion beyond your client's current dissatisfaction with its terms? The momentum shifted. After that hearing, 2 weeks later, I received a call from James. They want to settle, he said. Lawson's asking for the penthouse and $5 million in cash, I laughed. Counter with the prenup terms, not a penny more. After another month of back and forth, Elise finally accepted reality. The divorce was finalized with terms almost identical to those in the prenuptial agreement. She received a cash settlement that, while substantial to most people, represented less than 2% of my net worth, plus her personal possessions and car. I kept the penthouse, though I had already decided to sell it, too full as it was with memories I'd rather leave behind. On the day the divorce was finalized, Elise and I saw each other for the first time in months. As we left the courthouse, she paused on the steps. I hope it was worth it, she said, winning at all costs. This wasn't about winning, I replied. It was about consequences. We both made choices, Elise. She looked away. Your lawyer was good. So was yours, I acknowledged, but even the best lawyer can't overcome the truth. We parted ways there on the courthouse steps. Our 7-year marriage dissolved in a series of signatures and legal pronouncements. The divorce, like the corporate separation, had proven that contracts and legal structures could end partnerships, but they couldn't erase the complex emotions left in their wake. One evening, about 4 months after that fateful company party, I was working late in my office when security called to inform me that Elise was in the lobby, requesting to see me. Send her up, I said after a moment's consideration. She entered my office hesitantly, a shadow of the confident woman who had commanded rooms with her presence. Her designer outfit was as impeccable as ever, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes I'd rarely seen. Thank you for seeing me, she said, remaining standing even after I gestured to a chair. What can I do for you, Elise? She took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what happened, about the choices I made. I want you to know that I'm sorry. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Sorry for the affair, or sorry you got caught? Both, she admitted with unexpected candor. And sorry I lost sight of what we built together. What you built. She finally sat down, perched on the edge of the chair. Richard left me as soon as it became clear I couldn't deliver the investors he wanted. He's already dating some venture capitalist from San Francisco. I'm not surprised, I said, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity. Richard has always been a convenient opportunist. I've been approached by Meridian Tech, she said after a moment. They want me to lead their marketing division. but they need a reference from you. So that was why she was here. Not remorse, but necessity. And you want me to tell them what a visionary leader you are? How your marketing genius built Nexora from nothing? She flinched. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm good at what I do, Jonathan. The parts I actually did, the branding, the presentations, the client relationships, those were real. The rest, she trailed off. The rest was ambition and delusion, I finished for her. She didn't deny it. I'm asking for a second chance. Not with you, I know that's gone, but professionally. Please don't destroy my entire career. I considered her request. The anger that had fueled me those first few weeks had largely dissipated, replaced by a focus on rebuilding what had been damaged. I'll tell them the truth, I said finally, that you're an exceptional marketer and public speaker, that your branding strategies for Nexora were innovative and effective, and that as long as you're kept far away from financial decisions and executive authority, you could be an asset. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. That's more than fair. It's not for you, I clarified. It's because I don't want to be the kind of person who destroys others out of vengeance. That's Richard's playbook, not mine. She nodded, standing to leave. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, you're a better CEO than I ever was. The company's quarterly results prove it. After she left, I sat in the silence of my office, reflecting on how completely my life had transformed in just a few months. The humiliation of that night had forced a reckoning that was long overdue, not just with my marriage, but with my role in the company I'd created. 6 months later, I stood in a renovated warehouse space in Austin, Texas, surrounded by whiteboards covered in code and half-empty pizza boxes. The team at my new venture, TrueCore Labs, worked in organized chaos. Young, brilliant engineers who cared more about solving impossible problems than corporate hierarchies or market perception. I hadn't abandoned Nexora Systems. It continued under new leadership as a solid, if unexciting business that generated reliable returns for its investors. But the true innovations, the next generation security protocols I'd been developing in secret for years, those came with me to TrueCore. We were smaller, leaner, and infinitely more innovative without the constraints of quarterly earnings reports and investor expectations. Our first product launch had attracted the attention of several major tech companies, and acquisition offers were already rolling in. I declined them all, determined to build something that would remain true to its founding principles. Occasionally, I saw Elise in industry news. She'd done well at Meridian, turning their marketing department into an award-winning team. I heard through mutual connections that she'd started dating again, a professor from Northwestern, someone completely removed from the corporate world. I hoped she'd found what she was looking for. As for Richard, his star had fallen precipitously after several of his board recommendations resulted in failed investments. Last I heard, he'd retired to Florida, where he presumably spent his days playing golf and telling exaggerated stories of his glory days to anyone who would listen. One evening, as I worked late in the TrueCore office, David Wilson stopped by my desk. He'd eventually joined me at the new venture, unable to resist the allure of building something revolutionary. You know what today is? He asked, setting a bottle of expensive scotch and 2 glasses on my desk. I looked up from my code, confused. Thursday? It's exactly 1 year since that company party, he said, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into each glass. The night everything changed. I leaned back, accepting the glass he offered. Has it really been a year? Yep, and look where we are now. He gestured around the open workspace, where a handful of dedicated engineers were still at their stations despite the late hour. From corporate politics and betrayal to this, I'd call that a win. I raised my glass in agreement. To unexpected transformations. And to the best revenge, David added with a grin, building something better than what you lost. As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey. The humiliation of that night had stripped away my illusions, not just about my marriage, but about what I truly valued. Not the penthouse or the press coverage or the admiration of strangers, but the pure satisfaction of creation, of building something that hadn't existed before. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, energized by a new algorithm I'd conceptualized during my morning run. The team would be arriving soon, bringing their brilliant minds and boundless enthusiasm to another day of pushing technological boundaries. I passed by the small kitchen area where someone had left yesterday's newspaper open to the business section. A headline caught my eye: Nexora Systems acquires startup founded by former board chair. The article detailed how Richard Collins's new venture had been purchased by Nexora at a fraction of its initial valuation after failing to secure adequate funding. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The man who had tried to take everything from me had ended up selling his own creation back to the company he'd been forced to leave. Life had a way of coming full circle. My phone buzzed with a message from our lead engineer. Just cracked the encryption problem we've been stuck on. You're going to want to see this. I put down the newspaper, leaving the past firmly behind me. There was work to do, innovations to perfect, a future to build. In losing what I thought I wanted, I'd finally gained what I needed, and no one could take that away from me again.